In the 1980s, my father was a geek. It was a title he gave to himself after amassing 800 comic books. But in the 1980s, if by the time you got to college you were still collecting comic books, you were essentially painting a target on your back. So my dad hid away his comics, and with them, all the playbills for his shows, model toy cars, and Calvin and Hobbes newspaper clippings. But nothing stays hidden forever. I'm Buddy, you can call me Bud, and I'll be cataloged. In doing so, preserving my dad's legacy as a geek. The first title we'll do is Superman, because Superman is a character that my dad would murder for, if murder was legal. My dad's collection runs from January of 1987 to October of 1987, with issues 1 through 10 respectively. The whole run of issues is written and drawn by John Byrne, with inking done by Terry Austin for the first 3 issues before Carl Kessel came in to take over for the rest. Before we get started, let me just explain something if you don't read comics. They are unlike most other storytelling mediums in that you don't really want to go all the way back to the beginning anytime you're looking to get into a certain character or story. So when you get into reading and collecting comic books, you often want to find a writer that you really like or start at the beginning of a specific story that may happen at any point in the character's history. So typically, if you pick up a particular run of a long-running superhero, it won't be the first issue because a lot of superheroes are not on their first issue. However, John Byrne does something interesting. See, he put his Superman title back to number 1, and with it, basically announced that he was resetting Superman's status quo. The story doesn't start at the beginning, though. Superman is already an established hero by the beginning of the first issue, and he's also already a reporter at the Daily Planet. But the book uses thought bubbles to keep new readers up to speed on the status quo, and doesn't really introduce a big overarching story. The overarching story is more subtle, giving the issues a better chance to expand and explore in Superman's world. And because of the thought bubbles, Superman feels a lot more relatable, because he's got this constant, quick, and careful thinking that guides the reader through the process of being the man of tomorrow. It's like this run is set up to answer questions that people might have about Superman. How does he end up on all his adventures? Well, Clark Kent is a reporter, as are returning supporting characters, rival and love interest Lois Lane, and Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. And now, all 3 of them are shown more through the lens of this journalism career than through anything else. How come nobody recognizes that Clark Kent and Superman are absolutely the same person? Well, Clark Kent is constantly thinking about how to hide his secret identity. He avoids cameras, vibrates his face at super speed while he's Superman so that nobody can get a clear look at the details of it, and he's constantly thinking about how his change into Superman could look to the people who are around Clark. Besides this, nobody believes Superman has a secret to hide. Lex Luthor himself finds out in issue 2 that Clark Kent is Superman, and he just straight up won't believe it, because he thinks that somebody like Superman with Superman's powers would never hide as somebody as small as Clark Kent. So, what is the conflict? What makes Superman's stories interesting or fun? Well, Clark does. Clark Kent is kind, and that kindness means he's often holding back. He can't just come in and destroy everything because he's worried he might hurt somebody, even if it's the villain. He's also smart, and there's a real thrill in reading these stories where he launches into every situation already thinking of what his next 5 moves will be. But most importantly, Clark Kent is human. His family life is emphasized all throughout these stories. His family and Lana Lang, his childhood friend, are the only people who know he's Superman, and that's important because Superman fights with the values of Jonathan and Martha Kent, because that's what makes Superman who he is. Not his powers, but his morals. The stories are endearing because you can relate to Superman, and thus feel like you're strapping into his underoos, and from that perspective, all the unbelievable things about Superman suddenly become very human. Now, the reason I'm doing context after the review is because, like I said, a lot of times reading comics is just picking up and going, and so I wanted you guys to have the experience of learning a little bit about a run before learning the context. That being said, John Byrne was in one hell of a spotlight when this run was coming out. People were interested in what was being touted as the reinvention of a legend. John Byrne insists it wasn't a reinvention and that
We are doing classic Superman. Because we're taking him back to where he started.
Before his run on Superman, Byrne did a miniseries called The Man of Steel, which laid out most of the reinvention of Superman. Prior to that miniseries, Superman had kind of become a mess of a character. He gained a lot of extra powers, side characters, and lore, which just generally made his character a mess, which was charming in its own way. But in the back of the first issue of Superman, Byrne noted that he had marked down all the barnacles that had accumulated on the legend that needed to be pared away, chipped off, or otherwise discarded. These stories see that refined Superman in full throttle. They're stories where his powers are stripped down, analyzed, and proven to be just a part of what makes Superman so special. The other part, Clark Kent, his heart, his mind, they're just as, if not more, important to what Superman is seen as. The final thing I thought was vital in cataloging these comic books is using them to make an underinformed opinion about the man who collected them. And I feel from viewing these comics that nobody can stop me from saying that this is a really good explanation for my dad's brain, which is one that's constantly racing in my opinion. Now, of course, I know that you don't know my father, so you can't really understand what I mean when I describe him unless I'm more descriptive, and so I will be. My dad is like a lot of people in that he is constantly thinking about everything that could go wrong in any situation, ever. If he was at a dinner with a friend that he's known for a really long time, that friend may stop and remind him at certain points not to overthink the interaction, because that's just how well my dad is known for trying to get into other people's heads and figure out what they're thinking, or as therapists call it, projecting. It's not that Superman inspired him to think this way, it's that he already thought that way. In fact, a lot of people think that way. It's called anxiety. I know when I found out that I had anxiety, it really helped me to know that my dad thought the same way. And that's why I think I could see why it would be nice to read a Superman comic where his mind is racing in the same way, but it's in order to save the day. Part of being a hero is worrying about other people and constantly taking time to make strategies. And it's not a Nick Fury or Batman level of contingency. It feels very human. Also, there are these toy car ads. And it's not as many toy cars as it is comics, but it is enough to get what the advertising promised. So, that was Cort's complete collection of Superman comics. The title Superman, not the character Superman. He's got a couple more different titles for the character that I hope to get to someday. It's a really good run for getting familiar with Superman, and it's got a lot of good self-contained stories where you can just pick up the issue, read it, and not really have to worry about what happens before or after. Come back next time for Daredevil. Oh, and did I mention that my dad is also the king of the Irish goodbye? On the next Quartz comic collection. Wait just 60 seconds. Daredevil's a lawyer?